Going on? Start it? Okay, thank you. Audits and Government Efficiency Committee for Tuesday, April 26th. I'm Councilmember Zine. Councilmember Parks is another committee. Councilmember Smith, is he scheduled to be here? Do we know? Okay, Mr. Smith is no. Mr. Parks is another committee. We have 3 items on the agenda, and you want to start with what? Start with number 1. Number 1, Mr. Clerk.
Item number 1 is a City Controller report relative to the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act performance and financial audit of the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, issued March 3rd, 2011.
Representatives come forward, please, on this matter. We have questions for the controller, DWP, Mayor. Okay, go ahead.
Cynthia Varela with the Controller's Office. This is the Controller's 4th audit report on ERA activities. The report on DWP's processes for ERA projects was issued on March 3rd and covered activities from October 1st, 2008 to August 31st, 2010. There was an earlier time frame that we looked at because some of the water projects had started before the ERA awards. The objective of the Controller's ERA audits is to evaluate the processes departments have in place to ensure compliance with ERA requirements and that funded programs and projects are implemented efficiently and will result in the intended outcomes. As of our audit period, DWP had been awarded 6 ERA grants for a total of $112.7 million to modernize the city's electrical power system and for water quality improvement projects. Overall, we found that DWP made good efforts in establishing processes that will help ensure it complies with ERA requirements and expectations, but there were some areas that could be improved. For example, at the time of our review, we identified that DWP's processes for monitoring ERA-funded projects made it difficult to identify reimbursable ERA expenditures, which leaves the department vulnerable to not receiving all eligible ERA funds. We also noted that projects funded by ERA did not meet some federal contract requirements and initial job figures were not accurately reported. DWP's contracting group had not incorporated all of the ERA contracting terms to ensure compliance with all of the ERA requirements, such as Davis-Bacon Act and the Buy American, and DWP needs to ensure that those are included in its contracts. There were some ERA projects that had been slow to start and therefore not ensure grant or established milestones will be met and expected outcomes. The jobs created or retained will occur timely. The number of jobs reported by DWP may not be accurate and lacked adequate support. DWP had reported the number of jobs created on one project based on estimates rather than actual hours worked, and even the estimations they provided were not adequately documented. While we have not received the department's formal action plan and implementation status, at the time of finalizing our report, DWP had indicated that most of the issues noted in the audit had been corrected subsequent to our field work.
Okay. So you've done 6 audits on ARRA funding?
4. This is
6 grants.
6 grants, correct.
Okay, so you've done 4 audits on the ARRA grants. And did you find similar problems with all 4 of them?
Generally speaking, yes. I think probably the primary issue that we had, we looked at Public Works, we looked at the Bureaus of Sanitation, Street Services, and then we looked at Department of Transportation. And for those reviews, we found that those projects were slow to start, and basically it was because of the contracting process, getting it through the contracts, getting the contracts reviewed and approved so that the work could get started.
How long was the delay getting them started? Months, weeks, years?
You know, I think it was months, and I'm going off memory. I don't have the reports in front of me, but.
And while they're being delayed, people aren't working.
That was what our concern was, yes.
And what would be your most important recommendation coming out of the audit? Most important recommendation?
For DWP specifically, or?
DWP.
Gosh.
Would it apply to all of the departments, or just, would they be unique in that?
I don't know that they were unique in it. I think we had the same kinds of concerns about making sure that the projects, that the milestones and the outcomes were being tracked and met. I think making sure that everything is being reported correctly and accurately, those were the types of things that we noted in the other projects. So I don't think we found anything unique to DWP in what we were looking at here compared to the other departments.
So all basically be the same. But a delay in getting them moving, which, does that then jeopardize the money?
It can if eventually you don't spend the money. I mean, there are end dates that you have to report all of your expenditures. When we did the Department of Transportation and Public Works, what we were assured by those departments is even though that they started off to a slow start, that they had no concerns that the project would not continue and be completed timely and that all of the funds would be used.
Okay. All right. We're joined by my colleague, Councilmember Bernard Parks, and you're with DWP?
Yes, I'm Ann Santilli. I'm the Interim Chief Financial Officer for DWP. We're in the process of finalizing our formal response to the audit, but we have taken steps to correct the actions noted. Basically, the audit gave us 6 recommendations, the first one being to create new work orders to track these projects accurately for job creation and cost, and we have done that for both projects that were identified. The second one was to ensure construction contracts comply with ERA requirements. This item was pointed out because the contracts were issued prior to knowing we were being awarded ERA money. So what we've done is we've issued change orders with those general contractors to ensure that they will comply with that. They are in the process of getting back to us. That one was basically all of our water funds, which we have spent all the money on, and we basically assumed that by the end of the month that will be a closed item. The third one was the quantification of metrics and guidelines for our energy efficiency block grant. We have been working with the CEO and the mayor's office to make sure that that grant stays on track. We have developed milestones. We've met with the project grant administrator from DOE on that, and we believe that project is moving forward. The fourth item was to ensure that our labor hours and job creation numbers were recorded accurately. The first 2 quarters, we did have some hiccups because that was when we were first starting out. However, since that time, we have made improvements. We've been working with the CAO's office and the mayor office to make sure our jobs are reported accurately. And they're not aware of any differences or any adjustments to our numbers that need to be made. In the event there need to be adjustments made, we do have a process in place to correct that. Our fifth item was implementation of process to ensure contracting procedures adequately address ERA requirements. Our supply chain services office has developed specs to be included for all ERA and federally funded contracts going forward. So that's a very good thing that came out of this audit. And then the last one was our labor monitoring. Right now, we do use a city department other than the department, the Bureau of Public Works. They are a state-certified labor compliance department, and so at this time, we think it's most appropriate to use them for our work, but we will consider bringing that in-house.
Okay. Mentioned the project, 6 grants, 112.7 million, and 4 are completed to date. What types of projects are being funded?
We have our smart grid demonstration project, which is the largest. That's a $60 million, where we demonstrate how electric vehicles, demand response, cybersecurity can be used going forward. We have 3 water projects for $35 million, which are 2 water pipelines and 1 reservoir cover. And then we have the energy efficiency block grant, which has 5 smaller programs where they look at on-bill financing, energy efficiency, and items like that. And out of that $112 million, we've expended approximately $40 million.
Out of 112, only 40 million spent?
Yes.
And the rest of it's sitting there?
It's in progress. Our biggest one is the Department of Energy Smart Grid. They have a project grant administrator that works with us closely, and it's on a phase-by-phase basis. Right now, we're in the preliminary design phase. We can't move forward with any construction or implementation until they sign off on that. And so that one, it's on track. We have a project schedule. It's moving forward, but it's a brand-new concept, and so they want to make sure that they agree with the way we're using the money.
And how many jobs have been created? With
The last number I have in total was approximately 66 jobs. I don't have any additional information at this time. I don't know, I know the CAO's office and the mayor's office tracks that if they have something we can follow up.
So $40 million from 66 jobs?
A lot of it was construction, pipeline, materials, things like that.
It seems that we'd have a lot more jobs created with $40 million. And materials are expensive, but I didn't think they're that expensive. How many do you expect to be created in the future? How many jobs do we look at establishing with the additional projects?
It's different for each one. I'd have to report back on that.
Okay, we need to find that out. But well, ARA is supposed to hopefully create jobs, put people to work, use those dollars for infrastructure improvements. But when you're looking at $112.7 million, you would think that there's a whole lot of jobs being created, in addition to what you already have on the water and power workforce, but additional new jobs.
And that's all we're allowed to count. So when we have our own, and that was one of the auditor's concerns, is that we didn't want to over calculate the job creation. If they're not funding it, we're not allowed to report it. So I think our biggest job creation will happen once the Department of Energy approves our implementation of Smart Grid, and we're actually allowed to go out, install meters, and put some infrastructure in place.
Now, you talking about meters, you're talking about electric meters?
Yeah, automatic meter reading, that where you have the, doesn't require somebody manually going out there. It would be two-way communication, yes.
So they can check that remote
Yes.
from some central headquarters? Okay. What type of oversight has the department put in place to track the 40, well, actually the 112.7? What kind of mechanisms in place to track, make sure it's all done properly?
Basically, right now, we're really working with the mayor's office and the CAO's office to make sure it's spent accurately. We report in, I believe it's monthly, on our spending and quarterly on our jobs completed, and everybody's making sure that those monies are spent accurately.
And then what's the department's timeline to report back to on the controller's audit?
We will have our formal response back by the end of the week, and then I think the controller's office has 30 days to review that, and then they'll let us know when they're coming back out.
Okay, so it's almost finished.
Yes.
Okay, someone here from the mayor's office? Representative from the mayor's office? Since the mayor goes out and gets this money from Washington, what are some of the consequences of not meeting the reporting requirements, the RR reporting requirements?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Councilman Parks, Rushmore Cervantes on special assignment with the mayor's office. If the departments and the city does not meet its financial obligations or expend the monies within the time frame allotted within the term of the grant, there is a potential for losing those monies, either reverting back to the grantor themselves or being reprogrammed to other parts of the country.
Are we within the boundaries so that doesn't happen?
I'm sorry.
Are we within the boundaries that does not happen, the 112.7 million? And I'm sure there's probably more money we've accumulated.
There are. Well, right now, the mayor created a special task force, including myself, to oversee these projects. There was a total of $611 million total received, or excuse me, awarded, and that's amongst 110 different projects that's being administered by 22 different departments. So what the mayor's office has done, working closely with the CAO's office, is work with each department and come up with milestones for both expenditures, deliverables, and track jobs that are being created, and tracking against those to ensure that we're meeting our mandatory obligated deadlines for each of the grantors. And we work with them to push along where we need to be able to ensure that the departments achieve those goals. And if they're not, then we find out the reasons why and try to help push the monies along to ensure that we get the monies out in the community as quickly as possible in the designed manner that which the programs were designed.
And what we're trying to do is put people to work, not with the existing workforce, but additional people to come to work to do these projects.
creation of jobs is a byproduct for many of the grants that the city has been awarded. There are some projects specific to job creation, say for instance WIA, but there's others there where the employment is a byproduct of the overall delivery of the services. So we have to spend the money, deliver the product, and through a byproduct of that, we will hire people from within the city, or retain jobs within the city, or hire new people.
Okay. Are there any instances where the city has lost monies because we have not met the RO requirements?
No.
Mr. Parks? Questions? Any other information from any of you? Okay, so we want to note and file the audit, instruct the Department of Water and Power to report on the controller's findings and recommendations, include the following: a timeline to ensure our expenditure requirements are met, a number of jobs currently created, retained by the department using the funds, number of jobs to be created, retained at the conclusion of all DWP ARA programs, and is Department of Water and Power on track to create, retain the appropriate number of ARA funded jobs by the conclusion of the program. So I can make sure we have all that done, and then we'll note and file this at this particular time.
Just want to make a quick comment to the jobs again, Councilman. What the appropriate job level or job creation is. Most of the grants did not have a specific goal of number of jobs to be created. As the departments receive the grant awards, they design the programs and implement them, and through that there are jobs that are created through there. So when DWP or any other department is going to come forward with their plan for expenditures and delivery of services, the number of jobs to be created typically is not going to be a mandated goal. This was just a byproduct of the delivery of the services. And so I just want to make that clear. When you are receiving those numbers, there was no clear number, but the most important thing for the city is that we have delivered the services that we're contracted to do within the time frame, or do it in faster time frame than we were allotted.
As I understand, what the federal administration wanted to do was create jobs and help infrastructure, but while we're helping infrastructure, not with our current people, bringing additional people in the federal infusion of $112 million. I'm sure there's more than that on other programs that we have, to not only finish the project, build the bridge, whatever, but put people to work. It's got to be a joint effort on both sides.
Well, it certainly is, and the departments are creating new jobs. My mere point is that there is no specific goal for many of these grants, and I want to give you an example as far as just the numbers. And the way the OMB has required recipients to receive or to track jobs is not done in a manner which is easily discernible. They don't allow the recipients to cite FTEs, or full-time equivalents. It can only be done on a monthly basis because the type of jobs that are created sometimes are summer jobs, or they're just part-time jobs, or they may be craftsman jobs where they're at a site for a couple of hours. So the way the city is tracking the jobs is compliant with OMB, but what we've also done is to calculate, or at least track, the number of hours that of work that these grants have created. So of the $611 million the city has been awarded, the city's already spent 40% of that, and through that we've funded 4.4 million hours of work. That's equivalent to about 2,100 full-time equivalents. So that doesn't mean there's 2,100 jobs created, but it just gives you kind of the gross number of hours that are out there. So when DWP cites what sounds like a low number, that's because the OMB is very restrictive of how we can really state jobs. But when you look at the macro level, as far as number of hours that have been funded, it's rather significant from the 40% that we've spent, 4.4 million, and we continue to track it that way. So we can be able to tell the community this is the type of money that's going into the community for work, whether it be full-time, part-time, or a couple of hours here, a couple of hours there.
Because I understand the pitch that came from the federal government is we're going to establish these funds, we're going to go out and bring people back to work throughout America. And when you see those signs up, the American Recovery Act means recovery of the job market, not recovery of building bridges and paving highways, even though it takes personnel to do that. So I hope we're in accord with what the standard is from the federal government, and we're not interpreting it in a different manner.
No, actually, we are in line with what's required by the federal government, and I understand exactly what you're saying, Councilman, as far as that's what the message was, but what departments like DDP and the other grant recipients they actually do the specific grants, it's a little bit different. They're tasked first to deliver the product and spend the money as quickly as possible and have the byproduct of being jobs. But we as a city, CAO and the mayor's office, we are counting those hours and presenting it properly, both through the OMB, but from a larger perspective, so people get a sense of just the amount of hours are being paid in the community for salaries.
Okay. Well, I understand. The public interpretation, I think, was a little different than
Yes.
the practical application. So, okay, thank you. So that'll be the direction on number 1. And we are now going to go to number 3. Mr. Clerk, number 3, then we'll come back to number 2.
Item number 3 is motion Zine Parks relative to Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, customer billing and collection practices, and the feasibility of conducting an independent audit of those practices.
Okay. So we have Mr. Ron, you're in the right seat.
I believe so.
Go ahead, proceed.
Thank you, Chairman Zine, and I appreciate the chance to address these issues before you here today. I'd like to start with a few introductory comments. I also have John Chen, who's the head of our customer services department here for LADWP, with me as well to answer questions to the extent we can here today. I'd just like to provide a little bit of brief context for these questions that have arisen with respect to delayed or otherwise questionable bills on behalf of our customers. Just as a reminder, we have 1.4 million power customers and about 685,000 water customers. And despite the fact that of these issues that have been raised with regard to some of the billings that we've had, we get 99.75% of them right within industry standards, that is within 90 days. That compares to an industry typical of 98.5%. So despite the fact that there are some people that are getting late on their bills or have concerns about their bills, we are better and well above in our accuracy compared to the industry standards. Now, is that an excuse for having multiple months go by and having no bills or a information bill from our customers? No, it's not. We would like it to be 100%. The reality is we won't get there. We are human. We do make errors, and obviously, in addition to that, for that 0.25% that we don't get timely or accurate, we'd like to be able to get on top of that problem faster and resolve it quicker, and we're working on that. In fact, the department has, in the last few years, cut in half the number of these delayed billings. We've got the problem, I guess to put it another way, the problem used to be twice what it is today. And even then, at that time, we were still well under kind of industry norms. But we're doing that right now in terms of dealing with this problem, dealing with the very antiquated customer billing system. We have a 1970s billing system that we're also in the process of updating. It's a major investment. It's a multi-year process. But right now, for us to sort through these, I mean, John can tell you, we go through and get a sort out using the existing computer program that we've got that puts out, using some specific criteria, lays out, here's some questionable bills, look through these. And it would be nice if that was a quick sortable list, but it's not. It prints out on hard paper something about like an encyclopedia thick. And throughout that, somewhere amidst that encyclopedia thickness of single line reports are the real problem accounts that we need to get through. So it's an effort. We do it, human eye has to go sort through that and to find that. And we miss some. We do suffer from being human and don't get them all. And then in those rare cases, some of which I think you've heard about, where a customer has called us and inquired and we were not responsive to them, then shame on us. We need to fix that, and we are looking into what we can do with regard to that. We do have a partial fix to start out on this, and that is within starting literally next month, dealing with that same antiquated system that we've got. We put some time and effort into changing our bill to get better information on that bill. That's going to help the customer, and it's going to help us. It's going to provide information that goes back for more granular information on the bill and what's in it, and more importantly for this specific issue of delayed bills, it'll go back and give you what has that billing been for the last 12 months. So the customer can see it and say, all right, gee, this is really different from what it was before. Our people can see that. So when we have a problem, we'll be able to pull that, we'll have that information. And while we'd like not to rely on our customers to be the one to point out our glitch, this will help them do that and sort through that. I think the key thing is that once we do that, and this is like 20 months down the road for the next fix, we'll have a modern system. We'll have a digital system that can slice and dice our bills and get information much more granularly, be able to sort things through much more pinpoint. And even though we're already below industry, better than industry standards on billing and accuracy, we expect to get better yet, and more importantly, be able to discover those problem areas quicker and act on them quicker. In the meantime, though, we are encountering some of these problems, and as we do that, we will work with our customers. Our policy is if it's a delayed bill, we will give our customer just at the outset the duration of whatever that billing delay was to repay the bill once we get it to them. And if there's a financial hardship and a problem associated with having a large bill that came due to either an error on our meters or an unread meter, we'll work out a custom payment plan for them on that. With that, I guess I'd be happy to take some additional questions here. And
It was reported that 1% incorrect problems with the customers' water and power. Where does that number come from, the 1/4, 1%? You mentioned that you're 99.75% correct within 90 days. Talk about the standard in the nation of 98%. Where do you come up with the 1/4, 1%? How do you estimate that?
well, we sort through our bills. I mean, we sort through the bills to get at this information. We also go through and we test our meters. We go through on a statistically valid program to go out and test the meters. So it's two things. It's one, we ultimately do get to this information with respect to our delayed bills and bills that are in error. And then on top of that, we actively go out and do a sampling of our meters and test them to make sure that even though they're operating, make sure that they're operating correctly and accurately.
Okay, and one of the concerns I have on businesses, I've had some business owners, or let's say commercial property owners contact me that they had a business, open up shop. After a couple months, the business is closed. They move away, they stiff them on the rent, haven't paid the water and power bill, and then somebody's going after them from the city to pay the water and power bill. We've got businesses, we know that the economic environment is not as positive as it used to be, and you drive down any street, you see for lease on all these commercial properties. What happens in a situation where someone opens up an account, water and power, mostly power, in a commercial, because they don't use that much water, when they leave, they stiff the landowner, the rent, they don't pay the rent, and they haven't paid their water and power bill. So what do we do on those situations, and how many of those do we have?
Councilman Zhang, we will normally look at the account service, the entity that's under that account. If it's under landlord, then we go after the landlord. If it's a tenant that's registered with us for service, which they have to go through an application process, identify their legal name, and take ownership of that particular account. Whoever is on that particular account, that's where we go for collection if there is a.
Okay, so I own commercial property.
Yes.
And you're a businessman, and you come and you rent commercial property. You rent
Yeah.
a storefront from me.
Yes.
And I charge you so much a square foot,
Yes.
and we have a lease for a year.
Yes.
you then go out and sign up for the water and power, because I, as the owner of the property, I'm not gonna do that under my name. And then the individual, after 3, 4 months, leaves, doesn't pay the rent. Midnight, they're gone. They haven't paid me as the landowner. They haven't paid their water and power bill. Who are you going after? Because the water and power is not registered in my name, registered in the ABC business. That's one of the concerns, because landowners are contacting me saying this is a problem where someone rents from them, they leave, they haven't paid the rent, and then the water and power is going after them for the electrical water bill. Said, I got already stiffed on the deal, on the lease of the commercial, and now the water and power wants me to pay for that too. That's a problem. Going after the landowner, the person who's registered owner of the property, who had nothing to do except try and rent their storefront to a business that didn't survive. I mean, driving down today, coming into City Hall, there's a business that I used to see there for lease sign. I don't know if they stiffed the landowner or not, but it seems to be a problem happening with commercial properties, where they're not paying the landlord, they're not paying the owner of the property the rent, and then the city somehow is going after the person who owns the land, because we can tell by the tax records. But they're not the ones that open the business, they simply own that storefront. What are we doing in that situation?
Well, we can look at any of the particular cases, but if the customer signs up for services, normally we assess deposits and we view them as the account holder. We hold them responsible. If the landlord, for some cases, guarantee the service or they waive the deposit and say, I'm the one who co-signing the application, in that particular case, then the landlord is also liable for that payment.
So the person that opens ABC business in a storefront, and they signed the proprietor of that particular business, I don't know what kind of deposit you require, and they don't pay the bill, how do you find them?
Well, we use third-party agencies to locate them. We have experience. We have other credit agencies that has those type of information. We will go after them. And if we don't, we also retain outside collection agencies, and they help us to locate.
What's our recovery rate on that?
Fairly good. I mean, it's
What's fairly good?
20% time.
So 80% of the people are stiffing the Department of Water and Power. 80%. You're saying 20% we're collecting. That means 80% we're not collecting.
Yeah, but the overall uncollectible percentage is below 1%. And again, compared to the industry,
Forget the industry. I'm talking about Los Angeles. I'm not worried about the industry. Because I know these people who own commercial properties who come to me to say, water and power is now after me to pay this water and power bill. The person who was renting this space has skipped out, hasn't paid the rent, and now water and power wants me to pay their bill. And you're saying those people are getting caught and paying?
Well, we do our best to.
No. I want the answer to the question.
Yes.
I wouldn't be surprised if it's 20% that are paying and 80% are skipping out, and we're not collecting when we go to collections. How are we going to find them? Where are they going to go? That's the problem.
Well, Councilman, I think the stark reality is that some customers don't pay, and we have about 0.8% of our power customers, 0.8% of uncollectible accounts. So it means we have 99.2 of our percent we recover. That other 0.8% we don't. That can be from people skipping. It can be from people just simply living there and just simply not paying. It could be from a number of issues.
At what point do we cut the water off? At what point do we cut the power off? At what point do we say the rest of the consumers like me that pays my bill on time,
Right.
I'm paying for that burden of the people who aren't paying? And businesses that are paying for those that aren't paying. Whether it's 8% or 0.8%, that's one of the problems. And then it falls on the backs of the legitimate business owner. They're paying a higher rate. I mean, it's not like I can go get another water and power service in the city of Los Angeles.
Right.
You've got the Department of Water and Power. There's no competition. It's not like a cell phone. I want to get a different company.
Right.
You're it. So the consumer doesn't have an option. And for the benefit of the taxpayers, we have an obligation, responsibility to hold them accountable and make them pay. We're not talking about cheating them.
Right.
But that's a serious problem. And you talk about numbers because you got millions of people.
Right. And we do have a cutoff and
How far delinquent?
a stop service
How far delinquent before they're cut off?
After 45 days, they're eligible for cutoff, turn off. After 2 notices, we issue to them, and after 47 days, they're eligible.
So they'll be able to run for 47 days without paying a bill.
We can. I have to tell you that particularly in these economic times, we've been trying to give a little bit more benefit of the doubt to people. Our uncollectible accounts have gone up a little bit as a result of that, as we try to work through with our customers, recognizing the economic times that we're in. And it's a balancing game.
Well, I understand it's a balancing game, but those of us that are paying, those businesses that are paying for those that are delinquent. That's one of the problems.
That is a fact, and that's why we try to do everything we can to keep that number as small as we can.
And I know in some parts of this world, and I've been to some other countries, where they pay ahead. It's like a parking meter. You pay ahead, and then it deducts from that. And I've been at places like that.
Right.
And you don't pay, you don't have the power, you don't have the water. Have we ever explored that on some of these places? Where they pay ahead of time?
Yeah, we are looking to
Then
prepay,
deduct that?
yeah, prepaid metering.
Like a parking meter?
Yeah, prepaid metering. We're looking into the system right now.
I mean, there are situations where I think that might be appropriate. Because I don't want to cheat the taxpayers. At the same time, people who are going to use the service and then not pay, that's not fair either. So when it comes to late billing problem for residential and commercial customers, how do we know it's isolated? I mean, we're estimating. How do we know that it's not? Because we put out that news conference today, the Waste, Fraud, and Abuse Hotline. What happens when we get 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 people that call that, say, you know what, this happened to me, happened to me. We had a lady show up at the news conference today, heard this story last night, and she was at our news conference today. And she had the microphone and she spoke how it's impacted her, her family, how she's pulled her son out of karate, how she's pulled her son out of other sports activities to pay this bill. And she just heard it in the news last night. I'm wondering how many people are going to hear it on the news and then call this Waste, Fraud, and Abuse Hotline. And now, what are you going to do about that? How are you going to follow up on that? How are you going to remedy the situation? Because we've now opened this can, and I don't know how much is in there, but I estimate there's thousands of people who have this situation.
Well, we believe we know. We believe we know how many there are out there, and as to how many there are out there that we haven't acted on, will this bring them out? Yes, it could well. To the extent it does, we have a customer service team to respond to that and get on top of that issue.
And I would say the customer service team needs to be courteous to these people who are willing to pay Mr. Epstein, who was there, $23,500 bill. That's a lot of money for a small business owner to have to pay. And then there's other individuals. And I was first alerted this months ago by a federal judge, Harry Pragerson, who brought to my attention about a residence where this was happening. I thought this was totally isolated, and it's obviously growing over the past few months. Mr. Parks is aware, Ms. Perry's aware. I mean, this is growing in numbers, and our concern is that we keep it accurate. When you go to the gas station and you put that hose in the gas tank, you know how much you're paying, you know what you're getting, because the county weights and measures is make sure it's accurate. You're not getting cheated. And that's the concern, is some people are getting cheated by the city, and some people are taking advantage of the city, and we would look for honesty and fairness on both sides. So the amount that's calculated is estimate, and then the back bills, when someone owes $23,000, you owe $23,000. This one lady who owed $1,200, they said, you don't pay it, we're going to charge you a finance charge, a late fee, and we're going to give you a notice to shut off your water and your power. We got to be a little more understanding with these people, since it's our error, not theirs. I mean, the Department of Water and Power's error. And I don't want to blame you, Ron, because I know you're new. I'm not going to point the finger at you and say you're a bad general manager, because you've inherited this. So I'm not going to criticize you, but the department hasn't been as responsive as they need to be to the people of Los Angeles.
Well, I'm not certain of the exact facts in that circumstance, and you're right. Some of these things I have inherited. By the same token, I am responsible for the department, and I stand by to make sure that we do the service that we can do to make it right. I don't know the exact circumstances of this particular case.
She was at our news conference. I'll give you that information.
Right.
Follow up with her.
But at the end of the day, if it's a situation where the person wasn't paying their bill, then they were, despite our error, I mean, they were getting, in effect, a free ride for a while. Then they're paying it back. We will stretch out that time for paying it back. And if it's our error on something with respect to finance charges. I'm not quite sure why that was quoted to her.
Late fee, I think it was a late
Late
fee.
fee.
A late fee.
Well, if it's our error, we work through those issues with them.
Because I imagine you're going to get a lot of complaints, because we've really opened this up.
Well, you have, but at the end of the day, like I said, I think we know the number of situations that we have. Might this create a spike in people getting in touch with us? It could. We'll deal with it. We'll push through it. Like I said, we have been working on this to actually cut it in half from what it was a few years back.
Which is a sad situation.
Well,
that
you know,
we had that problem.
Councilman, it's true. It seems that's the case, and I hate to fall back on industry standards, but I will from the perspective that we're even where we were before, we were better than industry standards, and we're twice as good as we were before at this. I think the more important thing, and the point that I take here to heart that I want to make sure, in addition to getting more accurate, I think it's important that we're more responsive in those circumstances where we get a customer calling in and we work with them more. And I think it's the rare occasion that we don't, but John is certainly even more acutely aware of this issue now in terms of making sure that our people are dealing appropriately when we do encounter the situation.
I have a number of questions. Mr. Parks, I'll come back.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to, first of all, thank your department on one regard. We had an incident that occurred in the 8th District where a multifamily unit was foreclosed on. And the Department of Building and Safety basically went out and red tagged the building, and we had to end up spending about $70-some thousand to move them. And it was all over about a $20,000, $25,000 water bill. And when that came to our attention, we've gotten good support from WP and Housing and Building and Safety, so that there's a little more precaution made as it relates to particularly foreclosed property. And so we're appreciative of that. There's a couple of things I'd like to bring to the attention. We had a young lady that contacted us recently that didn't get a bill for about 22 months. And in that 22 months, they said that her bill should have reflected that her meter was broken. And so when they finally came back with almost, I guess, $1,600 to $2,000 bill, she said basically she was unable to pay it. When we talked to somebody on your staff, just picked up the phone and called in customer service, we were advised that from there, and this is as of March 18th, that the department had over 4,700 defective meters that were in play, and a lot of it had to do with the fact of the cutbacks and things of that nature. What we thought was interesting when we asked them about the 22 months and the defective bill, what should the person have done? Their answer was they should have put some money away over the last 22 months contemplating when the bill was coming. And we said, well, that's probably reasonable. The problem is that most people aren't going to do that. They're going to pay what they get. And it appeared as they were moving forward on that discussion, there was some tension about whether they were going to make some arrangements to allow her to pay this in over time. And so that's one incident that we were, and this is very recent. We had another one that but 22 months is kind of strange to us. But the other one we had was a business, and this happened back in mid-2010, where one of the businesses ended up with a $488,000 water and power bill.
Say that number again?
$488,431.53. And it appeared once they went through it, they found whoever read the meter put a number, one more number than it should have been, or did something. Well, anyway, they resolved it, but that then drove us to begin to look at a couple of things that keep coming up in our district, and that is, it appears, and I don't know to what industry standards and things that we work towards, but it appears that other companies are far further along on digital meters in which we're not relying on human beings making a 7 instead of a 9, or the common explanation may not be accurate, but a common perception in the community is that the meter readers kind of drive by and estimate. And then finally, one day they decide to stop and they read it. And then they go, oops, I've underestimated for months, and here's your $2,000 bill. And the key is that's what the community believes, whether it happens or not. but the issue of some of these fluctuating bills gives pause as to whether the meter reader is physically going out and looking at the meter and giving that accurate number, or are they cruising by and say, I'll catch it every other month, or just what are they doing? And so those are a couple of things that we're concerned about on 22 months is much longer than what your letter reflects as a norm. The $488,000 is just a matter of a number got placed in the wrong place. But again, it certainly caused that business owner pause as to what do I do with this? And then the couple of things on the digital meters, whether that's in our future. And the other one, I know I'm giving you about 12 questions, but I'm going to go, at my age, if I don't say it, it disappears. But the other one is that we have a constant complaint on, particularly in multiple units, is that there's a universal meter. And with that universal meter, the problem is if you're in a foreclosed unit, no one in that building individually or collectively can pay what the bill is, and nobody knows who's using what. And so the issue is, do we have in the future the idea of new construction or rehabilitation that we're going to demand individual meters? Because I think it would also help our conservation. But these are the kind of things that maybe you can respond to. I know it's a lot of stuff, but that's a kind of a litany of things that we are dealing with in the district.
Sure. I'll respond to some, and I'll let John respond to the others, because he'll have more detail than I do. I can appreciate the issue with regard to what they call master meter or universal meter. I just moved from one apartment that was a 1970s era apartment that had master meter, where I just got a monthly flat bill no matter what I use. So it gave me no incentive to conserve, even though during the whole time I was there, I think I didn't ever turn the air conditioning on once. But so in that circumstance, you're right. Somebody moves out, somebody else picks up, and that's an issue. Clearly, I just moved into a new one that you go to the parking garage and there's just a line of meters out there, and everyone's out there, and everybody's accountable for their own bill. Everybody has their own incentive to do it right. That's certainly the way we want it done, and the standard in the future and under new construction. On the issue of is 22 months extraordinary, it is most definitely extraordinary. How that happened is kind of beyond me, to be honest with you. It is phenomenally rare, and we do work with people on paying these out and work out arrangements on that. And if there's circumstances where our customer service person didn't do that, we'd like to think that the customer shouldn't have to call back, but we will work through those issues. In terms of the number of automatic read meters, I don't know, John, you might want to give some statistics on that and where we are on that.
Let me just ask one thing before we go. Are we on the threshold of new construction installs independent meters? Is that a norm now, or?
There was some discussion on legislations making that happen. I don't think it happened yet, but we have been encouraging developers to do that. It's a cost and space issue, because when you lay all those meters it takes real estate and property, and sometimes they don't want to do that. But I think as time goes, if we can get some remote readings of the water meters, it will also help issue about the space, so you can have smaller meters that's located closer to the unit and be able to remotely read it. Otherwise, the meter reader had to go to each house. If we have, let's say, 150 units, then it's a lot of work in reading that. But if you
do we have that ability now to read digital meters?
Well, yeah, we have installed for Department of Water and Power about 75,000 digital meters. There's different kinds. For the large commercial accounts, we have actually two-way meters with two-way communication capabilities. So we can actually ping and retrieve information remotely. And there's also drive-by. We have those equipment called Audits that's installed on the water meters. So the meter reader doesn't really have to go open up any caps. So they can just walk by and be able to remotely pick up those meters. And part of the plan for the next 3 years, we're planning to install additional 50,000 of those smart meters under the DOE grant program. So we're doing that too.
But now, is the future that we'll get away from even driving by, that you'll be able to read them from a central location, or is that somewhere down the road, or is that in our future, or what?
I think it's a cost issue. So there are some industry, companies within the industry has replaced every meter ears with a two-way, but it's very expensive. It costs billions of dollars for them to do that. But there are other approaches where we will concentrate on the high usage accounts to have the two-way, so this way you have a better monitoring system and be able to track it more closely. But there are some other meters that the usage is very, very low. And if the regular bill is only $30 or $20, it doesn't really make sense to spend $600-700 to install an advanced meter just for that purpose. So there's different ways approach to it. Some are more expensive, some are more cost effective, but obviously the functionality is also different.
Now, is there at some point some cost benefit to the city to doing that, as opposed to looking at it just from the cost of installation? Do we get any return on that kind of investment?
I think the verdict on that is still a little early. There are some company has implemented basically all of their meter with a smart meter. I think there was a lot of pushback from consumers, from the cost, and also from the technology point of view. They were talking about meter, reading errors. Sometimes if you're transmitting through, for example, through the wireless network, it's more prone to error that's been created on the system. So they're working through the glitches on the system. So I think we would like to probably just sit back and watch all that unfold. And we want cutting edge technology, but we'd like to have other people to test it first before we get on to them.
But on the R money, what will we end up, once that grant is finished, is the number of meters that will be out?
Additional 50,000 meters.
I mean, 50 plus what's there now?
75,000, so total is 125,000.
And we have what,
2 million.
2 million?
2.1 million, yeah.
I could add a comment on that. There have been some circumstances where some investor-owned utilities went out very early on, sometimes 10 years ago, and did a total change-out for these types of meters, and spent hundreds of millions of dollars of doing that. And it becomes a cost to their customers. It becomes a ratepayer cost to do that, only to find that now those meters don't do what we all think the smart grid should do in terms of two-way communications and being able to get time of use information and things of that sort. So when John's talking about not wanting to be too much on the cutting edge, there's a situation where somebody gambled and lost. They're going to end up having to reinstall at some point all of those meters all over again, and we're trying to avoid that problem. We don't want to be lagging too far behind, but we don't want to end up building in something that we then find 5 years later is obsolete and not doing what the vision of a smart grid should be doing.
But now is the game plan that on the smart grid, once that's tested, that will be the template for the future?
Yeah.
That's a big issue right now. One of the, and this is a global issue, and that is what should be the proper standard for these meters in terms of the technology that you use and the features and functionality that they have. Very much hot debate on that topic right now on a global basis on that. So I'm hopeful. One of the things that all this ARA money is doing is there's several smart grid programs around the country, and they're really trying to test different aspects of that out so they can get a good view what works, what doesn't work, so that we can learn from that experience and make it happen quicker. And of course, since Department of Energy is funding that, all that becomes very public information. And we can share that and hopefully accelerate getting to a standard that everybody uses. It does two things. It makes something that everybody says, okay, everybody else is using it, I'm kind of comfortable doing as well, and it drives the cost of those meters down when you get them going on a larger scale.
Also, again, is there a step in there that we begin to see some benefit on conservation if people have a much more real-time usage figures? Or
yeah, absolutely. Once you get time of use information, of course, with that has to be time of use rates that causes somebody to say, I want to save some money. Once you have that, they go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. and you work that through, and that will indeed get people to be more efficient with their use of energy.
And what's the timeline on the grid? How much longer before that's completed?
For the 50,000 meters, it's 3 year. And just a couple areas, I think it will be very interesting for us to do, and the cost benefit, really works out. One is in apartment, for example, dormitories. You have a lot of moving and out, so each year you have a lot of turn on, turn off. Instead of sending field crew to literally to turn it off or turn it back on, if we can remotely do the turn on, turn off, that makes sense. The other thing is, even for the 3,000 or 4,000 Lifeline customers, right now we actually have installed a pilot project, the meter in the pilot project. Well, within 5 seconds of outage, I actually get an email to my BlackBerry telling me that this Lifeline customer is out of power. And then within 5 seconds of restoring the power, I also get an email back that their power has been restored. So in incidents of power outage management, especially for extended power outage management, we want to know where those customers are. So there are areas that it really works out very well for those type of meters.
And then you mentioned there's some companies that jumped out ahead. Is that locally, or how do we compare with local companies as it relates to that technology?
The ones I'm speaking to are not in California. They're in other states under other jurisdictions. In terms of how we compare with other California utilities, I don't have those numbers right at the top of my head. John, I don't know whether you do or not.
Yeah, I have some number. Glendale Water and Power installed about 100,000. City of Anaheim installed about 700. And the Burbank is about 26,000. So those are some of the local companies that.
You said 700 for Anaheim?
Anaheim 700, that's correct, for the commercial customers. And they are planning for a few thousand small meter for their residential customer in the next year or two.
And what were the other two?
Glendale, Water and Power,
And what was theirs?
100,000.
And the third one?
Burbank, Water and Power, 26,000 for water and 1,000 for electric small meter.
And then going back to the other question, dealing with the issue of new construction, is that now voluntary, or is that something that DWP is imposing, or is that an ordinance being worked on, or just where is that?
We, the department unfortunately can't require that electrical codes and such are not under our domain, and we obviously encourage it. We would like to have a situation where we never had anything other than an individual meter at an individual business or rental unit. But unfortunately, we're not in a situation that we can force that. Due in part because of the fact that there is an incremental cost of doing it.
Is that something that either building and safety or planning could impose, or as part of an ordinance that on new construction that this is now an obligation? We've done it on some of these backflow valves where houses are up in the hills, and if you don't put a backflow valve on, sewage comes into your bathtub, so now there's a requirement that you shell. We've done it with grease, grease machines on restaurants that you have to have a degreaser or something. So I'm just wondering, is that something that building and safety should be looking at for the future, for as an ordinance, as a requirement for major rehab or for new construction?
We did it with gas meters, seismic, when you change ownership.
Well, I think we start, number one, you start with the California building code, and then, of course, LA has its own building code, so it would end up being something that would be, if we're to do something along those lines, it would have to be a mandate as part of a building code.
Thank you. Now, we have done similar requirements in the building. For example, you sell your home or a new home, you got to have the device in your gas meter in case of an earthquake, automatic shut-off.
Right.
So, I mean, we can implement an ordinance to require the separate meters, which I think helps in conservation, because if you're not paying for it, doesn't mean the same as if you are paying for it, meaning the central unit for apartments and condos, et cetera, so.
Right.
But we have that ability.
And Mr. Chair, I think that's particularly true when we're dealing with the number of rental,
Right.
some 60% of our properties in here are rental units. So it's not a minor portion.
So what process does the department have in place to identify faulty meters? Do we have a process in place to identify faulty meters?
Yeah, the system, there's several ways we can identify. One, of course, the customer can give us a call, let us know there's something wrong with the meter or the bill. The other is the system actually look at the consumption number. If it's too high, too low, there's formulas that's established. If it's more than 100% of the previous month, then it kicks out a report. So to ask us to do additional follow on that. And the other thing is we also have quite a few number of a meter reader that goes through, the city of LA and read the meter and see. Sometimes they see broken meters. If there's wires that's open, then they also can report on those defective meters and tell us.
Are they required to do that as
Yes.
they're inspecting the meters?
Oh, yes, yes. And they do that constantly.
And then it says that 2 months, one billing cycle, when they have a faulty meter, to make that change.
Well,
If they have a faulty meter, 2 months, one billing, in other words, billing cycle's gonna take 2 months to get that up and running. So we bill that person for 2 months. Well, actually, the residential is billed for 2 months.
Right.
And that faulty meter is discovered, can that be done quickly so they don't incur an additional bill?
yeah, so the process, Councilman Zion, for example, each time, every 60 days, you get a bill. If something wrong with the bill, it at least takes 60 days for people at least notice or get the meter read and get the bill look at, say, oh, is it too high, too low? Sometimes it may take a couple of those cycles to identify there is an issue. Once we identify, sometimes we send meter reader to go out to verify. Is this maybe there's an error in the reading, maybe it's just read wrong or reread it. And when we verify if it's not, and truly the meter itself is broken, then we put a place order, say, replace that meter.
How long does that take?
1 to maybe 3 to 4 weeks. That's
To replace the meter?
yeah, 1 to 3 weeks, because we do have a backlog. It's everything there is a process in the backlog. And right now it's about 1 to 3 weeks to do that.
And does Edison Gas Company, Metropolitan Water, do they have similar problems with their meters?
I believe every utility incurs that type of problems with the meters. Yes.
Okay, the new billing and the collection system, what's the implementation date for the new billing and collection system?
We are, two things. In May, which is next month, we are rolling out the new bill format, which has consumption information on it and have graph charts of consumption for the past 12 months. And also, it shows clearly the Tier 1, Tier 2 different rates. There was a lot of questions on it. So hopefully that will give customer and also Department of Water and Power some better visibility in identify some of the issues. And the second phase, as Mr. Nichol had mentioned earlier, probably in the beginning of 2013, we plan to implement the new system.
So between now and then, we have some problems to address.
Yes, and we're still addressing it, even though sometimes it may take some small automation projects to do that, or just manually to go through it, and we're doing that.
Okay, because if, I don't want to bring up a negative story, but the city of Bell, it created a problem, and you saw how that situation has mushroomed to other cities. So when we look at the situation, we look at, is it a few, or is it a lot? And that's the question. When you open the door, you don't know what's going to be there. And as this publicity is going out, I imagine we're going to get a lot more customers who are complaining, not the fact that it's an expensive bill, but the fact is it's an accurate bill. And that's the key, that we want to make sure it's accurate. The internal audits, can you speak on what those audits have found, the internal audits at the Department of Water and Power?
Well, during the past 5 years, I think the Department of Water and Power internal audit has conducted approximately 20 audits on the various process related to customer service operations. That's from handling the cash register at the branch offices to credit and rebill the customer if there's billing errors, And so there's a variety of things that they have looked at and continuously look at. So average is about 4 audits per year that they're doing for us. Collection, they also look at the collection success rate. So as those report comes out, wherever there's area that needs to be improved, we aggressive address those issues.
Now, do you do any internal audits, or is it all up to the controller?
It's Department of Water and Power and the financial service organization. There is an internal audit group, and
Within the department?
Within the department, and they conduct those audits.
Okay, what outreach efforts to commercial and residential customers can the department undertake to make sure our constituents are aware of the problem, and who in the department is going to contact? When they become aware they believe there's a problem, who do they contact? What number do they contact within the department? If they don't want to call the waste abuse hotline, what number do they call?
1-800-DIAL-DWP.
1-800 what?
Dial DWP, DIAL DWP.
Okay. So the next question, this came up from another individual. Why do we have an 800 number in the city of Los Angeles for the Department of Water and Power? We don't have a local number? It's all 800? In other words, we're paying for that. We're paying for an 800 number.
Yes.
Versus paying for the regular number.
Well, in the past, actually, there were quite a few numbers that's with area code 213-818. The problem is that the way we handle self-services, we have done a project about 18 months ago where in the past about 8 to 10% of the calls are self-served through an interactive voice response system. That sometimes can cause problem because of the service response time. But right now we are averaging about 40 to 50% of the time where all the calls are instantly self-serve. You can just get on it 24 hours.
Button, this and that.
Push a button and you can get your answers. So in order to make sure that we don't have multiple telephones that goes to the towards the end and to the back end system, so we centralize the 1-800 number so that all the calls go through that trunk, and it's better to handle for that system.
And what about the reporter on the computer? What do they contact if they want to do it online?
There's a website that they can log on to, www.ladwp.com, and they can report on that too.
They can report it online or through the phone.
That's correct. They can send emails also to us. Yes.
And so if people have a problem, waste, fraud, and abuse hotline is one number, or they can call 800 dial DWP.
That's correct, sir.
Or go online and report it.
Yes, sir.
So once you get that report, what are you going to do?
We follow up.
Which
We
means
sign-
what?
we si- we
Otherwise,
sign-
send them a bill.
Well, we sign up. We have various groups. When the customer service operation, we have branch offices. We have the web. We have the IVR system. We have the contact center. So once we get those customer inquiries, and we assign to different groups. There's a revenue management group that handles looking at the accounts if we're in the rear. How do we make payment arrangement, things like that.
Do you run all those operations?
Yes.
You're responsible for everything?
Yes, sir.
So I would suggest you tell your employees that they're probably going to get some angry customers and to be understanding and not hostile toward the customers.
Yes, we have already done that this morning, sir.
Also, you're aware of something going down.
Well,
No, because the people who hear this are obviously going to be angry.
yes.
And no one likes to get ripped off. So it's not nice when the person responding by behalf of the department is not with a nice attitude to say, we'll take care of this for you.
Okay.
Instead of, what are you bothering us for? We need to be understanding for these folks' problems.
Yes, we'll do that.
So how much is it going to cost to do a complete audit of DWP billing and collection practices? I need the controller to come forward now. A couple of questions for the controller. I spoke to the controller about this morning, or this afternoon, I should say. The cost to do a complete audit of DWP, the billing and collection practices, or have we already done those audits for water and power?
Excuse me, Fair Safari with the city control. No, we haven't. In order to
They
scope,
haven't done billing or collection practices? With
I'm
water and
sorry?
power? Have you, as the controller, ever done an audit with water and power on billing and collection practices?
no, we have not done.
Okay. So what would be the cost to do that?
In order to get an accurate cost, first we need to know the scope of the audit, make an assessment in terms of whether we are dealing with system issues, process issues, or a combination of both.
But that's the question, the billing and collections. That's what the audit would contain, the billing process and the collection process.
Well, that process involves the information system, the billing system, the distribution system, service connection. I would not know in terms of the details to
Okay.
give you an accurate answer at this time.
Okay. And I think with the issue that went out to the public, we're going to find out how many customers are having problems with their water and power bills. I think we've already done enough outreach on that with the wastewater and abuse hotline. If DWP were to pay for the audit, how quickly could that be accomplished?
Again, it depends on the scope, depends on the magnitude. If you're looking at the entire system, you have to do what we call an information systems audit, looking at controls within the system, or we just want to look at in terms of the processes around that system, the processes, the controls that they have for bill preparation or meter connection and so on.
Okay.
Again, depends on the magnitude, but it could be in the area of 3 to 4 months audit.
Okay, so it looks like the controller needs to do some research, some background before we can get an estimate on anything.
That is accurate, yes.
All right, so here's what I'd like to do. Since the information went out to the people of Los Angeles who are served by water and power, if you have a problem, call wastewater and abuse hotline or contact 1-800-DWP. I think what we can do is take this matter, continue this matter. Yeah, but we don't have the answers. The question is, we need to get the answers before we can make a recommendation for something. Well, to an Energy and Environmental Committee, refer this to Energy and Environmental. Okay, so here's what we're going to ask for. Approve this motion, direct DWP to report on the findings of their internal audit on their billing and collection process. So Water and Power report on the findings of their internal audit and their billing and collection process. Number 2, direct DWP to prepare and present an outreach plan on how they will address this issue with their customers, to include an appeal process and a contact where a person can communicate with. Direct DWP to report on how this issue could be better addressed through the Office of Public Accountability to provide oversight for the Department of Water and Power, and request the controller to conduct an independent audit of DWP's billing and collection practices, including a discussion on the problems caused by late billing, to be done by the department's, at the department's expense, and then refer to the Energy and Environmental Committee to be heard on May 3rd. So between now and then, can we find some information out from the controller?
Yes, once we have an opportunity to get some preliminary information from DWP, we can scope that.
Okay, so that'll be the recommendation for this particular matter, to move forward to Energy and Environmental Committee to be heard. We have it scheduled for May 3rd, if that could be the case. And then we can put this matter before the public, get the answers, find out the magnitude, and come up with a better practice of addressing these issues. So, Mr. Parks, if you'll...
Let me just add a couple of things. One thing, the motion that we went forward on, which is CF number 110569, is in energy, and we'd asked that motion be taken up at the same time as this motion, because they're quite similar in the responses for that motion. The other thing I'd like to do is add that, which would be helpful, I think, once this comes to council, if the clerk can get with DWP and actually, in the committee report, give us some overview of what is the process that the community should use when they have a problem with their meter, and how should they go about correcting that. The other thing I'd like to see that we get from DWP is an overview of their city's, current city's digital program, so that we're clearly aware of what's going on and what the future. And then the final thing would be that we request the city attorney, LADWP, Building and Safety and appropriate city departments to create an ordinance that would mandate single meters for water and power meters at new construction or major rehabs. And so we can ask that to be put in the deal. And Mr. Nichols, let me just give you a name and a number. Maybe you can do a biopsy on this 22-month issue. young lady's name is Ewell, E-W-E-L-L.
You want to put that on the record, or you want to do that?
I'll just give it to you.
Okay, we'll do that offline.
Right.
All right, that'll be the direction. Thank you, Mr. Parks. Thank you, Mr. Nichols.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. We now have item number 2.
Item
Mr.
number,
Clerk.
item number 2 is the city controller report relative to a performance audit of the Renewable Portfolio Standard Program of the City of Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, issued April 7th, 2011.
All righty.
Good afternoon, council members. I am Doug Bennett, Managing Director of North Star Consulting Group. With me is Angela Anderson, the Director of North Star. North Star completed the performance audit of the DWP's Renewable Portfolio Standard, which is the standard by which they introduce renewable energy resources into their mix. The primary objective of the audit was to determine whether DWP had efficient and effective processes for implementing the RPS program and achieving the 20% goal by end of calendar year 2010. As a bit of background, in June 2004, the City Council adopted an RPS framework. In late 2005, DWP prepared and presented a master plan to meet the RPS goals. The policy has been updated a number of times since then, and currently the goal is to reach 35% by 2020. The first, in terms of summarizing the audit results, our first area of interest was to determine whether or not the DWP was on track to achieve the 20% goal in 2010, and we found at the beginning of the audit that they were in fact on track.
Okay.
In April 2010, the DWP's policy changed in light of uncertainties regarding cost recovery for the program. At mid-2010, the DWP projected an 18% goal achievement versus the 20. And then in late 2010, approximately November, because of reduced consumption, because of increased wind and hydro resources, they predicted that they would in fact achieve the 20%, which they said they did at end of year. In terms of our overall analysis, we found that the department had done a very good job on the supply side, but that deficiencies were observed in terms of their recognition and collection of costs, the transparency of those costs, and making those and building a robust financing plan to fund this program. Our key findings, if I might, were as follows. The DWP's renewable strategy changed in response to cost recovery uncertainties. DWP did not develop a well-defined financial plan in support of its operational plans to achieve the RPS goals. As DWP does not separately report overall RPS program costs, it's not adequately communicated the overall aggregate cost of meeting the RPS requirements. DWP and its board approved power purchase contracts without adequately assessing the impact on the ECAF, which is the funding mechanism, and customer rates. DWP did not develop an appropriate plan to address the long-term recovery of costs associated with the renewable energy program, given the cap on ECAF rate increases. And as currently structured, the ECAF does not provide sufficient transparency for RPS costs. And we developed 10 recommendations, all with that in mind, to comprehensively collect the costs, make them transparent, and build an effective cost recovery program in order to fund the program.
Okay. DWP?
Ann Santilli, Interim Chief Financial Officer. We've received the report, and we're working on our formal response, which will be delivered in May. We have made some corrective actions already in regards to our 2010 Integrated Resource Plan. We have integrated the financial plans and the IRP so that those do mesh. We are working on our cost analysis, looking at what we can do to improve that as far as the transparency as RPS and regular energy costs go, and that will be part of our response.
Okay. So the city's on track to meet its 2020 goal.
We believe it did. Those were not auditable.
2020.
2020.
2020. 2020?
We cannot speak to...
2010, they met
It
2010.
met its 2010 goal.
Okay.
The 2020 goal is dependent upon implementation of the program and funding sources in future years.
So we don't know if they're on track for that or not, for sure.
Cannot tell at this point.
Okay, and the consequence of not meeting the 2020 renewable goal, what are the consequences if it's not met?
The 2020, I cannot tell you.
Okay. And when will the rate analysis and financial plan be completed for our renewable portfolio?
It will be completed before the end of this fiscal year.
Okay. Prior to June. And when does the department plan to have a full response to the controller's audit complete? May
It will be done probably by May 15th.
15th, okay. Thank you. So, Mr. Parks, the recommendation, and I'll have, if you have any questions, but to continue the audit and request DWP to report on the audit's findings and recommendations. They have 30 days from the date of the audit. Hope to receive their response by May 5th. In their response, please make sure to include the cost effect on ECAF and ultimately the ratepayer. Mr. Parks?
No question.
So that'll be the recommendation to continue the audit, request DWP to report on the audit's findings. Recommendations have 30 days from the date of the audit. Hope to receive the response by May 5th. In the response, please make sure to include the cost effect on ECAF and ECAF, ultimately the ratepayer. Okay? Anything else from you? Good. Okay. Thank you all very much. That concludes our audits and government efficiency meeting. And a good day to all.
Amen.